What do gymnasts, bananas, and lifters all have in common? All of them are obsessed with splits. Hey everyone, welcome back. In today's episode of the Conjugate Codex, we're going to be talking all about training schedules and splits, and no, I am not apologizing for that dad joke. Before we dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrabio. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time, and the odds are very good I'd love to work with you. With that being said, let's get into it. Now, when it comes to training splits, if we think about Conjugate, it's usually advertised as 4 times a week. You have lower max, lower dynamic, upper dynamic, or in my world, developmental. I'll put a link to that chapter of the Codex in the description box down below for your reference as well. Regardless, you're usually seeing an iteration close to this with the 4 times a week. However, my goal with today's presentation is to talk about alternate splits you may consider based upon your schedule and goals that'll still allow you to make great use of this reliable and proven framework. If you've been following along with this whole series, you'll know one of the big things is understanding the 3 efforts within a conjugate system: max effort, dynamic/developmental effort, and repeated effort. Now, what's important is we have all of these present in the workout. However, we can adjust accordingly based on their schedule, what you're trying to prioritize, or if you're dealing with inconsistent equipment access or even an inconsistent schedule. So for example, here are some splits that I often reach for. If we're training 4 times a week, there's the vanilla split, which is the 2x upper, lower, max, and developmental day. Or I do something called a 1-1-2 split, which will be a 1 lower max, 1 upper max, 1 full body developmental, and then 1 full body accessory type day. Whereas if we're training 3 days a week, I'll often reach for a 3 times a week full body split or a lower, upper, full body program. Now, as far as which split is best, your number one priority is determining your schedule. The best split in the world doesn't mean anything if it can't be adhered to. For most people, 3 to 4 times a week training is going to be the sweet spot between balancing progress, recovery, and of course, your life duties. And once you have determined what those days your training are, you can actually figure out what your split's going to look like. We're going to have 2 hypothetical people here. On the left is person A training 3 times a week, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And on the right is person B, and they're going to train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, just as a brief sidebar, of course I have the weeks start on Monday, but you can shift it around based off of what you need. Just think 7 days and play backwards from there. Now, once we've determined the weekly schedule, picking a split becomes very simple. For candidate A, we're probably going to go for a 3 times a week full body split. Reason being is I find this one is the most conducive to a busy lifestyle in that, let's say you do miss a day in the week of your training, you still hit everything at least twice. That way you're not derailing progress so much. Whereas we might go for a 3 times a week lower, upper, full split if we find that there's someone who does have a very consistent schedule and they also pair that with very big strength and performance goals. Whereas candidate B, we're probably going to reach for the vanilla split most of the time. However, suppose they were a strongman athlete who had inconsistent implement access throughout the week, we may opt for something such as the 1-1-2, or maybe if it's something where most weeks they can train 4 times a week, but we know occasionally they'll have to drop it down to 3 times a week, this split gives us the ability to hedge our bets, but still make sure we get all the key priority work done. Now, referring back to client A, let's dive a little bit further. I had talked about using the 3 times a week full body split because they were on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. But suppose they were on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday type schedule. In this case, I'd probably pivot them to lower, upper, full. That way they're not training full body 2 days in a row, and it makes the split overall a bit more survivable. Whereas, if we dive a bit further into candidate B, the vanilla split on paper is probably going to be the best option, but the 1-1-2 split is very viable, and I think it's worth talking about a bit more, especially if you think about strongman athletes who might only have implement access 1 times a week, athletes whose schedule will generally allow for 4 days a week, but occasionally they have to drop it down to 3, or for athletes who need to spend extra time attacking a weaker specific body part. In the latter of the 2 cases, the 1-1-2 split essentially becomes the lower upper full body split, but with that 4th day is essentially your bonus day. Whereas for the strongman athlete, we would treat that 4th day as a gap day to either hit accessories that were missed during the week or do more restorative type work to help them recover from the training demands. To expand a bit more on 3 times a week training, a while back I had introduced the idea of 3 times a week full body conjugate, and to my surprise, a lot of people were very interested in it, and I find it does lend itself to easily fitting into a more busy life schedule. I think this particular iteration and split is worth taking a bit more time to discuss versus the other splits, as it also has more sub-splits within it. On screen right now, you'll see the 4 that I'm talking about: 2 max effort, 1 dynamic, 2 dynamic, 1 max effort, the split effort, and the Freudian split. With all of those, remember that you are doing full body accessory work as well, but let's go ahead and break them down individually. So again, bear in mind as I go over each of these splits, remember that every single day will have full body accessories. Our first option is the 2 max effort, 1 developmental or dynamic effort day, where you might go lower max effort day, upper max effort day, and then a full body developmental / dynamic effort. This one offers very balanced training stress across the week. In my opinion, it's extremely manageable and probably the most survivable option. It's probably the one I would reach for if I were to put someone on this style of programming. Next up would be 2 developmental / dynamic days and 1 full body max effort day. For some people, they'll find having 1 max effort day a week gives them more energy throughout the other days of the training week to attack their accessories. And then having 2 speed days a week allows you to spend more time practicing your setup and technique rather than trying to blitz through it. However, truth be told, this is not one that I would pick right off the bat. Reason being, having 2 max effort movements in the same session could be very draining, but again, for some people, they'll respond better to it. Our third option is the split effort, where you would do max effort for either upper or lower, and then you would move into developmental or dynamic effort for the lower or upper, just the opposite of whatever you did at the start of it, plus your full body accessories, and your third day would just be exactly that, a full body accessory day. I think this one acts as a really good way to manage fatigue, and that third day is also a good bit of a mental break since your first 2 days are so much more difficult in terms of intensity with your training. And then the last option would be what I call the Freudian split, where you have a full body max effort day, a full body developmental / dynamic effort day, and then a full body repetitive effort or accessory day. Every single day is going to have a very clear focus. So for some people, what this allows them to do is mentally lock in and get the most out of those every individual days. Conversely, having a full body max effort day, as I said before, can be very draining for some, but for others, it's actually going to force them to extract more from themselves. Any of these splits will work, but I do have them ordered in such a way that my first option, the 2 max effort, 1 developmental, would probably be the pick for 90% of folks who are looking for 3 times a week, full body, conjugate training. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, the Freudian split. Before I go any further, just remember, it's not that deep. This was just kind of a fun thought I had with a client when we were talking about her kids at daycare, and I made the joke that it's probably like Lord of the Flies in there. If you've ever read Lord of the Flies, you know the 3 boys in it, Ralph, Piggy, and Jack, are supposed to represent the 3 aspects of Freud's psyche. There's the id, which is primal desires, aggression, instant gratification, which would be Jack. Then there's ego, which is about reality, strategy, and control, which would be Ralph. And then the super ego, which is discipline, long-term thinking, and morality, which would be Piggy. So if we look at the 3 efforts of a conjugate training sequence, they actually line up pretty nicely with this. Max effort is the id. Heavy sets, chasing PRs, pushing limits. Dynamic or developmental work is the ego. It's about speed, control, and efficiency. Submaximal weights to address specific bottlenecks you as an individual have. And then last but not least, repeated effort is the superego. This is the boring work that makes you better long term. But again, it's not that deep. This is pop psychology, right on par with the videos of people putting on makeup while giving out really bad dating advice. In a nutshell, a training split is simply a way of organizing the 3 efforts of training across a week to maximize both training compliance and survivability. So that wraps up the discussion on training splits, and this also concludes the more theoretical portion of the Conjugate Codex, as now we're going to move into a practical application. What'll happen is over the next 3 videos, I'm going to be discussing 1 demographic as well as 2 different training splits for them. So our next video, we're going to be doing a strongman athlete, where we'll go over a 1-1-2 training split for them, where they have 1x a week implement access, as well as a 3 times a week full body Freudian split. After our strongman athlete, we'll move on to the power builder, who's going to be using the vanilla split for one of their programs, and then a 3 times a week lower, upper, full program. And then lastly, we're going to move on to a lifestyle client, where we're going to have a 1-1-2 4-day-a-week program, with day 4 being a glute emphasis day. So you could call this Conjugate training. And then a 3 times a week full body program, where we're going to go 2 max effort, 1 developmental. So that about wraps up our discussion today on training splits. I'm looking forward to the next video, where we'll be talking a bit more about the application side of things. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best questions and comments are ones I will turn into videos down the road. Anyways, I hope you folks are having a great day. I'll catch you next time.